big welcome to everyone here, and thanks so much for joining us for this special presentation with Max Fragar. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Stephanie Agas. I'm the Marketing Coordinator for Council Approval Group. And it's great to see so many familiar faces here, along with quite a few professionals from the planning industry. So thank you so much for joining us. Many of you may already be familiar with Council Approval Group's co-founder, Max Fragar. And today we're fortunate to have him share some of his experiences in how leading with vision has cemented his life and career success, spanning over 50 years. But outside planning, a few interesting things that you might not know about Max. He has a penchant for vintage cars with his own collection of classics and is very well known for arriving at meetings in his racy red Corvette. He's also a very devoted family man with children and grandchildren at the core of his everyday. But above all else, he has an unwavering desire to help people, which is shown through his volunteer work, his 40 years plus service to the PIA, and his commitment to Council Approval Group clients in helping everyday Australians uncover the highest and best use of their properties. So without any further ado, I'd love to hand over to Max to share his story today and his personal insights on the importance of vision in town planning. Thank you, Max. Over to you.
Thanks, Steph, for that introduction. And I don't take any responsibility for the technology. If you can hear me, that's good. If you can't see me, you're probably better off for not seeing me at this age. Thanks for being here, young and old. And I don't think there's many older than me, except my good friend John McInerney has been a mentor of mine for a long time. And Tony Max online as well. So thanks for that. Two very prominent planners that I regard as friends, and thanks for that. Look, I thank everyone in my team for putting this together, particularly Stephanie and Colin, who was alongside me, Colin being my son. Vision, I guess, vision. 10 or 11 years ago, Colin came back from Africa and said, I think I want to make your business a proper business, Dad. And I said, well, what's wrong with it now? Your mother and I have just put your sister and you through 2 or 3 degrees. But now we have the group that we have now, and it's the best team best positive and motivated, make things happen team that I've ever worked with. So thanks for that. Look, it's a great time to be talking about vision. And I hope look, I'm not saying the things that I talk about now, there haven't been all my visions. Visions come from a lot of different directions. And you see something and you think, I like that. I like that idea. I can make that a vision. But you have to a vision is no good. There's a quote that says, vision is only a dream without determination. So you pick up a vision and you work with it and you find people or sectors of the community that will support that vision. And if you can find multiple people that will support the vision, then that's great. So it's a good time to be talking about vision. We're just being released from COVID. We as a family, we're very fortunate. We managed to get into Queensland in June, and we had the vision to stay there until they're starting to let New South Wales out of lockdown. So that was a good vision. First screen, please, the Paul Keating picture. Okay, that's a quote, and I think it's my quote. I apologise to Paul Keating if it's not exactly what he said, but at a conference in Hobart, I was in the Planning Institute. That was the conference, 1994. I found this thing under the house a while ago. A sense of place and a place for people. And as part of the Planning Institute, I was helping host some of the top speakers. And Paul Keating in his opening address said that, if you as town planners can't have a vision for the future, what hope is there for us politicians? We had about 500 planners in Hobart at the time. So, just a plug for the Planning Institute. I was 40 years. Next slide. Who's doing the slides? Okay, that's a bit of a background. Look, you don't want to dwell on that, but I started in planning in Penrith, 67, and Penrith Lake scheme, we can see in a minute. John Wilson and Partners were a firm of predominantly engineers, but a few town planners, and I was fortunate to be a big part of all of those councils, and there was 2 more or something, doing the first town planning schemes, and they were done late 60s, early 70s, and when I go back there, there's a lot of what we decided then is still in place. Ipswich City Council was a great place, and talk about town centre improvement in Ipswich and other places. I got the job as deputy planner and then very quickly director of planning. I think it took about 2 months for me to decide I didn't want to be reporting through another person who wasn't a planner, so I became director fairly quickly. And that was 21 years of fabulous experience with Blue Mountains Council. And then in 1996, I got out and have been in private practice since. And of course, Colin came into it and set up what we have now about 10 years ago. Next. Okay, vision. Vision applies to everything, not just planning, but it applies to Planning Institute very much. I've found, and I'd encourage everyone in the planning area, if they want to mix with those planners that have vision, that are positive, that are those planners that are positive and have vision and good to work with, then get involved in the Planning Institute committees. I did that. You can see, and thanks, Tony. Tony's logged in for today. Tony was the president, New South Wales at the time, and nominated me as Life Fellow, and I value those words very much. But there was about 40 years where I was on various Planning Institute committees and roles. Rotary, having a vision and making visions work in voluntary organisations, I found quite difficult, but is also quite rewarding. I think that when I look back on Rotary, I think that's a special time. But what it taught me was that I'm not going to retire and do voluntary work to help people, because if I continue, and if Colin continues with the business and the team around me continues to allow me to do it, I can help more people in a big way by continuing to do what I'm educated to do. So, cooking sausages for Rotary, you might do it sometimes, but I can be more help to people if I continue to use what I've been taught, what my family my parents sacrificed to educate me. Wendy sacrificed to look after me through my career. The university's put in effort. I believe that I'm doing the wrong thing if I just throw all that out and play golf. Values in retrospect. Now, this is what's really, really important, and I think it clarified. And I can't say I knew all these things right from the start. But my team, and the picture on the bottom right of the screen is the team at our Gold Coast Summit back in June. We managed to get them all into Queensland and back out again before the lockdowns hit. So, yeah, a great team. And the team worked together, and this was the best vision setting, the best values setting exercise that I ever went through. And you'll remember the last scene, the shorter fellow is Dale, very valuable part of our business and a good friend of my son Colin. He facilitated this session, and it was the best values session that I've ever been involved in. And that was what really, when I look back now, I can look at these values, which are our business values, and I can look at those in the context of my life. And out of all of that, it became clear that what had really influenced, what had really led to success, and success is in your own mind. It's not in money. It's not in anything in particular. But what really, I look back at everything in family, in business, and with councils. What was the most important? Vision. But you can't have vision without values. There's no good having a vision for selling the most heroin in town. It's not the right vision. You've got to have a vision with integrity, and then you've got to have determination. It's a bit like my favourite city in Asia is Hanoi. Getting across the road in Hanoi, you've got to have a vision. You're going to get there. You've got to have determination, but you've got to be aware of the dangers. So you move forward, and you're aware, but you keep going with determination. Motivation and risk. We'll talk about some of those in a minute, but I'm just setting these, and thanks, Stephanie, again, for setting all this up. Motivation and risk-taking. There's an old saying that I had in my office at the council for many years: behold the turtle, for he only makes progress when he sticks his neck out. If you have a vision, you've got to be aware that there's risk involved, and there's going to be some hard work involved. So these are just a few examples that really stuck out with me when I went through my life, when I was marrying my life with the visions that our business had as a group had adopted. Penrith Lakes, I was a very junior planner. Somewhere something came across my desk at Penrith Council. And what do we do with all this, river flatland that is a real, it's a bit like Moonscape, because the gravel mining companies had destroyed it. And somewhere the vision for a lake scheme. And I took hold of that. And you really, you in a council situation, you can't pretend you take all the credit, because if you're going to make the vision work, quite often you have to let the councillors take the credit. So you just have to have in your own mind that your vision, that you believe in your own mind, that it wouldn't have happened without you. I believe by going and, putting on old clothes and going and talking to the gravel and sand mining people, getting them on side, I believe that was an integral part of the Penrith Lake scheme. So, having a vision and then having the determination and the prepared to take the risk and, walk into these places. Queensland local government areas, that's just a map of southeastern Queensland, but you can see the number of local government areas that we did in a very short space of time. And I look at, some of those places where we set height limits, and height limits stepped up the slope, and they're still in place. Amazing. About 8 local government areas in a space of 2 years, and you sort of go to a motel and you sit in the motel, you have 3 rooms, one room with a set up as an office, and you've coloured pencils and maps. And 2 months later, the planning scheme is gazetted. Just amazing experience. But again, you had to have vision. I slipped this in. My experience is that if planners have a vision and they enunciate that vision well, then they're always in front. I think, unfortunately, local government, particularly in New South Wales, has changed, and people don't get rewarded much for having a vision. They sort of, they're supposed to tick the boxes or whatever. But I think my experience is, if you have a vision, people want to be led. As Paul Keating said in the start, even politicians want to be led. They want to take all the credit, that's okay, but they want to be led. Again, this is what politicians are all about. Now, in reality, I probably shouldn't have been on that picture, right? And this was my ego at the time. I wanted to be there with Bob Davis and Laurie Brereton at the time. This was a Blue Mountains town entry scheme, tourist drives. I think we did that. We were the first local government area to do that. But you have to let people take the credit, and you have to get the right people on the bus. Fairmont Resort, again, I really enjoyed these projects. We had a population of about 60,000 people, and we had seven golf courses and clubs. They weren't sustainable. Lura Golf Club was broke, and this was this one. We had others that were whatever. This one was successful. We put together a package, had a vision, because who are the people that we're going to benefit from this vision? So you always have to think, if you adapt your vision so that you bring more groups and more people in to benefit and adopt it, then the better chance of success. So you want to, when you've got a vision, you ought to think, who's going to support this vision? In this case, the tourist industry needed, although some of them didn't want competition, some were a bit narrow thinking. They thought, oh, well, if you have another hotel, I'm going to get less people in my beds. But overall, the tourist industry could see that we needed a big establishment to help promote tourism in the 1980s. So you had the tourism industry on side. You had the council on side, because they needed extra income from rates, and the more we promote the economy, the better the council is. On the negative side, you had the Conservation Society saying, we don't want development on the escarpment. Interesting exercise. I got a helicopter, and we hosted the Conservation Society and showed them that if you put balloons up in the air where the resort is, we had to show to the Conservation Society that you couldn't see the top of the roof when you're down the valley. But anyway, the end result was you had to have determination, because we had to go to court. The Conservation Society said Max Fragar hadn't done the zoning certificate properly. He had an error in process, and we won that. And I even had the director of the Department of Planning against me. We won that, but then the Conservation Society went to the High Court. So in the end, we went to the Premier, and I took the Mayor and a couple of others, and we had an Act of Parliament brought down there. So there's risks, there's determination if you're going to make good things happen. Lilianfels, a great one. I really enjoyed doing these individual projects as the senior planner. The Lilianfels house at Echo Point, somehow it had fallen into council's hands. It was dilapidated, needed a couple of $1 million spent on it just to preserve it, and we didn't have the money. So I put together a package and went out to tender on the basis that the new owner would own the heritage building. It'd still be heritage listed, but you'd get the right to build a hotel alongside. So Mr. Nara from Japan rang me after I'd hosted a lunch with local member and whatever, and he said, Max, we're going to go ahead with this. So this was built. So that's sort of sticking your neck out. Carrington Hotel, interesting one. I hope this is not boring, but I'm just trying to show how, if you have a vision, you can. How am I going for time? Okay. If you have a vision, you spend a lot of time working out what is the right vision, and you spend a lot of time getting the right people on the bus, but then you have to follow it through. If you've got the right vision and you've got the right people supporting it, hopefully fairly soon that vision gets picked up by others, right? And you can move on to the next thing. So in this case, the council was saying, I had a young family. Colin was 3 years of age, who's now our CEO, and our daughter was 1. And all councils around Western Sydney in particular were doing pedestrian malls. And our councillors were sort of getting on that bandwagon and saying, we want to do a pedestrian mall in the top of Katoomba Street. I said, I'm not sure about this. I don't think it's the right thing to do. And at the same time, I had this young family. I wanted to take them around, or Wendy and I wanted to take them around Australia. And I said to the council, well, I'll do some research on town centre improvement. So 6 months around Australia, the council took the council car, took Wendy's caravan, and every town around the outside of Australia that had done anything about town centre improvement and promotion, researched that while Wendy was washing nappies or whatever she was doing, and came back and said to the council, no pedestrian mall. You need 250,000 residents to make a pedestrian mall work, because the last thing you want is a pedestrian mall where people sit there and feel they're the only person in the mall. You need it to be busy. So the council has accepted that advice, and also accepted the advice that what we needed to do was to refurbish the top end of Katoomba Street as the main commercial point of arrival for a world-class tourist area, being the Blue Mountains. And that happened. It took nearly 30 years for the forecourt of the Carrington to become essentially public space in a complex legal way, but it's publicly accessible. And the town's doing extremely well in spite of COVID. So the Carrington, the risks on the Carrington, the owner at the time was in the habit of buying heritage buildings, and he'd buy them and they'd run down, wouldn't spend anything on them, and then they'd burn. The Chevron at the Gold Coast burned, the Five Ways burnt, the building that was owned across the road from this burnt, but we managed to get it out of his hands and it didn't burn. So every time I walk into Carrington, I say, although others will have taken the credit, I went to the liquidation auction and addressed the buyers, and we got it sold. So I walk into this and say, I don't think it'd be there, but there was a death threat or two on my private telephone over that. Okay. Well, look, this is probably boring stuff, but I grew up in Orchard Hills, which if you're up on the hills with the peaches and the grapes in Orchard Hills, as we were, you could look out to the Blue Mountains and you could see funny things happening on the Blue Mountains. And so I go right back and think, gee, I really didn't need. I wanted to be looking at the mountains. I didn't want to be looking at shiny tin roofs and white buildings. So we brought in, I think, the first escarpment provisions, and that's vision. It wasn't easy because you'd have all these people, architects and owners, saying, "You can't tell me what colour to paint my house. You can't tell me what material to use on the roof." So that's vision and commitment, risks. You've got to predict, as in Hanoi, you've got to predict the risks and you've got to be able to work around them. World Heritage listing. Great example, and there will probably be 20 people around that take the credit for World Heritage listing. I believe what I did, if I hadn't done what I did, I don't think it would have happened. World Heritage listing came across my desk. I've been responsible for chasing grant funds, federal and state government grant funds. I've been responsible for chasing that for 3 years, and we'd trebled the grant income just by a senior officer focusing on knowing government policy and playing up to ministers and politicians and giving them the credit for a new TAFE college or a international hotel school or a highway upgrade. You give the politicians the credit and you get the money or you get the service. And what had happened was that we started to get so much money that all the councils around the place started to say, why is Blue Mountains getting so much? We should get more. So it twigged with me that World Heritage listing would give us would give us an excuse to get more money than anyone else. And it did. We became World Heritage listed. We're looking after the Blue Mountains for the rest of the world. It's not just for Blue Mountains Council. And so we got world, but the difficulty with this was, you had to think, well, the local fire brigade weren't happy. They thought, national parks, fires come out of national parks. You had to convince them and go to their meeting and say, well, if you've got more money, you can do more prevention work on the fringes of the national park. I had to go and address, we had to get when we went to Canberra, took the mayor and a couple of others to Canberra, and the federal minister said, yes, we'll go for World Heritage listing, UNESCO, but you have to have all three levels of government on side. We already had the state government on side, but then I had to come back and make sure I had 11 councils on side. So this is the determination. You have to put on your dirty riding boots and you have to go and address, Royalston Council. And of course, they didn't want national parks, let alone World Heritage, because the foxes had come out of the national park and kill their sheep. So you had to convince them. So we got 10 on side, and we got 9 on side, and 2 didn't make a decision. So on that basis, the federal government said we'll go for World Heritage. So vision and family. As I said before, the Carrington Hotel, pedestrian mall in Katoomba, at the time we wanted to take the family away, but there was also a reason, the council reason, the research. So your vision can be for both professional and family and lifestyle reasons. Actually, 1973 and 1985, both times, Ipswich Council, Queensland, and Blue Mountains Council, I was going to resign, and the council said, no, we don't want you to resign. So we did research on town centre improvement and came back and reported. So yeah, I've got back one. Yep. Okay. What do we do? I've talked about these big things, and there are lots and lots of satisfaction in that. And a lot of town planners will identify with that big picture planning stuff. I've always been a little bit disappointed that not many planners really genuinely see that the planning system is to a large extent for the good of individual people. And I did my last academic studies was I did some engineering and then planning, and then I did a graduate degree in social science. And that really was a light bulb for me, because it showed me that it was planning was for people. And so in our business with this best team that I've ever worked with, I now have the opportunity to be involved in we're probably doing 200 projects at any time, but I have the opportunity to work with the planners. We get engaged to do some research, then we have a good 1 hour session with a client, and very important to understand that client, because you can't help people unless you go to the trouble of understanding them. So work with that client, understanding the client, and then work out how you can help them. So if we go into a session like that, we're going into the session not for the purpose of selling them a development application engagement. We're going into it for the purpose of working out how we can help them. How can we use this horrible New South Wales complex planning system? How can we help them make a big difference in their lives? And that's incredibly rewarding, to feel that you've come out of this, that they said, oh, we want a studio because we're told we can't get a granny flat. And then in the end, and this is, grandma's getting older, but that grandma wants the family to live in the bigger house, and she wants to be up the back. And you go into that and you say, well, we can do better than a studio. We can even do better than a granny flat. We can do it as a dual occupancy, right? And you can subdivide it. And so that just makes, because it means that grandma's got a house for the time being, but you've got a saleable dwelling when grandma's finished. So now, being helpful, I find now, going into those sessions with our planners, if you go into it from the point of view of being helpful, not going into it with the objective of selling ice to, you don't want to be selling ice to Eskimos. You're going in to help people. Whether you actually finish up doing an application or a project for them, it doesn't matter. You've helped them anyway. So, vision. There's lots of things I haven't said, and I think I'm about on time, Colin. Okay. This is my quote. I don't think I've identified another profession that has the potential to have more beneficial effect on the world around them than a town planner. Now, I have to say, I have to change that a bit. A properly, genuinely motivated planner has that great potential. You look at an issue like, World Heritage or whatever, you realise there's a lot of people involved. But for one individual to have so much influence, really, it is magnificent, and it's been a fabulous journey. I think that I don't know. I think Tony McNamara is sitting there, and John Mack, but you might sort of see this. Just a little story. When I look back, this is a little Corvette car. I remember Tony was the chief planner at Port Macquarie, and we were having a state conference up there, and I was doing a talk. I remember even at the time, what I was saying was the planner needs to have the courage to be the leader. The planner needs to have the courage to be, in our case now, the principal consultant on a project. We'd much rather be the principal consultant running a full project for the client. We'd much rather be doing that than just being the town planner on a large architect-run project. So we want to be the project leaders, because as a project leader, you have more influence on a project. You have the ability to enunciate the dream and set it. I mean, multiple tourism projects through COVID. I think domestic tourism is going to continue to fire. And ecotourism projects, glamping projects, camping projects, farm stay projects. We're doing them everywhere. And we only do a project if we're going to run the whole project. And I think that, is, in a way, I'm now feeling that I'm having more effect on people, more beneficial effect on people than I ever have. What's the next one? Okay, so that's sort of about it.
Wonderful, yeah. So Max, thank you so much. That was an excellent presentation. It's so amazing to hear of all of your experiences, and I'm sure, incredibly rewarding career that you've had to date, but not only that, you keep on helping everyday Australians, and obviously through your work at Council Approval Group. I wanted to open it up to see if anyone had any questions or comments about Max's presentation. Any questions regarding his experiences in planning?
Other questions going to be better audio than that.
So Stephanie, this
Wonderful,
is Ken.
Ken.
So I have a question for Max. Max, I know that you've been doing planning a very long time, just like with your colleagues. And they're historically, up till probably, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, you really did not see a lot of diversity in planners. They were usually a male, they were Anglo, that was your typical person you would see as a planner. But probably within the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen a transition where we have a whole mix of people, including women, that are making the choice to come into planning. So we also know that there are other factors that go on where they have a ceiling. A lot of times people feel like, oh, well, I'm new in this type of profession, but how far can I really go? And so is there any guidance that you could give to people that were considering planning that are non-planners, or people that have entered into the planning field and need that encouragement and some tips to take it to the next step?
Thanks, Ken. I just answer that by saying I go back to when I went to Queensland in 1969. I think Joe Bianchi-Peterson was still Premier, and the word Banana Republic, comes to mind. But planning was a new thing. But if you're a planner with vision, you were supreme. And so planners were, the visionary planners were having an enormous influence and doing quite well and seen very positively by their community. Unfortunately, what happened, over the next 25 or 30 years, in my view, for whatever reason, whether it was ICAC and, you shouldn't be leading as a council planner, you shouldn't be leading things too much because it shows a bias towards a project, all of those things. I think planners sort of were a bit squeezed and lost that motivation to lead. I've seen a big change around over the last 10 or 15 years, and I think there's a much better attitude towards leading. I guess my advice to planners would be whether you're leading a major infrastructure project, but try to be the leader, or whether you're leading a small project for the council approval group, just have the courage to lead it. Don't say, and I keep saying this, it really niggles me. Oh, well, they don't want to do this, or the client, this is not what the client wants. It's our job to show to the client what's best for them, not just accept what they think they want, because they might not be well informed. So be prepared to lead, be prepared to stick your neck out and say to them, but I think you can do a better job by doing this. I hope that answers, Ken.
Wonderful. Thank you for the question, Ken. If anyone else has a question they're not comfortable to ask it in person, feel free to pop it in the chat and we can get Max to answer it. But yeah, anyone else with a question for Matt?
I wonder if, Stephanie, it's Tony McNamara. I wonder if I could add a couple of comments, and I might have to depart early if that's okay. I do apologise, but I just feel it's important to add a few comments to this day, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Firstly, Max, congratulations. We go back a long way, and I think most of what you said is very true. And I won't try to go through the low points of our careers. Let's stick with the high points. I think that's most important. I do thoroughly agree, and I think Max has always been a great advocate for the importance of planning and the role that planners can make to contribute to better projects. I 100% agree with that comment about planners, good planners being great project managers, because they're not focused on an issue, they're focused on all issues and great outcomes. How you achieve the great outcomes, it needs that breadth of vision to achieve that. And I think Max has demonstrated at local government as well as in private consultancy that he's managed to achieve that with his team. And all strength to you, Max, to keep going as you have done. I think it's fabulous that you've never lost the passion. You want to keep going and doing better. And also congratulations to Colin and the team. What I wanted to add to it is the fact that I think Max has put forward a very good argument for why projects can be improved, why it's important to planners, whether they're a consultant supporting the project or the local government person assessing that project and ultimately determining it, why it's so important to see the good in these projects. So many planners tend to, particularly local government, tend to, I think, apply a negative set of criteria. What's wrong with the project? It'll only get through if I can't find a whole bunch of negative stuff that will knock it over. That seems to be a reasonably common perception, unfortunately. And I think it's important for council people not to be totally in fear of ICAC. Obviously, you've got to be honest and impeccable in your approach, but still be enthusiastic about recognising good projects and giving them your support. The other thing, but what I also would like to finally add, if I might, from a local government perspective, and Max spent about 20 years, was it, in local, or 30 years perhaps? I'm not sure, but so it's a pretty good record. I think things have evolved a little bit, if I might say, Max, with respect since about 1996. Many planners have gone on to become general managers. I never quite achieved that myself, but certainly planners always need to work in that executive team, guiding not just the planning projects, but the whole of the council, basically, looking at the finances, looking at the social needs of that community, and using the best resources of council to support their community. Often, in my personal view, the planners have got that broad understanding of issues, both legal, social, economic, environmental, and provide that sort of guidance. But I think I don't think it's well enough appreciated. I think often these days planning is seen as just more red tape, and you always hear that. Let's cut the red tape and get some progress going. Well, actually, it should be seen more as green tape to give you better outcomes if you actually understand how rules should be applied and produce better outcomes. Sorry to be so long-winded on all that, but Max, you may agree or disagree, but I think you tend to probably agree with most of that, because I think we've had these conversations many times, and I'm sure John McInerney would have his own comments along the way, but he's obviously been a leader in the areas you have. So, as I say, I'll leave it at that. I might have to, as I say, I'll disappear a little bit early if I can be given a leave of absence, but just also want to thank you very much for the opportunity to attend today. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
We'll just dock your pay a bit, Tony, if you've got to leave. But look, Tony, I very much valued our friendship, and we haven't been able to get together much with COVID. But yeah, Tony was the New South Wales president for quite a while, and I think for most of that time I was his vice president. And I think we're a pretty good team, and whatever. So thanks, Tony.
Wonderful. And I'll open up any other questions.
I have a question. It's Elise here. Probably following on a little bit from what Tony was saying, I was wondering what advice Max had to help planners who want to have vision but feel so caught up in a reactive planning system when you really want to be proactive. How do you maintain that momentum of vision?
Was that for Tony or me? What about Tony? You want to try?
That was for you, Max.
That was for you, Max. I want to know what your thoughts.
I missed the question, actually. I was thinking of Tony. Just briefly again, advice.
Yeah, just advice for planners that seem to sometimes you feel like you get caught in a system of reactive planning to rules when you really want to be proactive. How do you maintain having that vision in that sort of situation?
I think that if you're caught in that system, you have to endure that system for a little while. But you can, if you've decided that you're going to be proactive, then you can carefully pick your mark on something that comes up where you can be positive. And it may be that you come up with that idea and you go to your immediate boss and you enunciate that idea and you let that boss take the credit for it, and then he gives it back to you to make it happen. So I think if you've decided you're going to be a positive planner, then you can do that, and then you do it the next time, because the bosses will think, gee, last time Elise had this idea, I got a real pat on the back from a counsellor, you know? So you've just got to be careful not to enunciate the idea too broadly when you're down the line somewhere, but give the credit to someone else. And then they will give you more authority and they will put you onto the jobs which require a bit of leadership. Okay. Just take it softly, softly. But I just find that, as Paul Keating said, if we can't have a vision, how the politician's going to survive. I don't see, provided your vision is a good one, if it eventually doesn't get picked up, generally, you're still seen as the person that really tried to do something good. And you're not going to be criticised for it, On the other side of that, if you've got a vision that you've carefully thought through, and if you fail to convince people that it's a good idea, then my attitude is I've always seen it as a personal failure if I fail to get people on board to that vision. It's the same with if I fail to convince this family or this tourist mob, they just don't want a couple of campsites. They should do a decent ecotourism project. If I fail to get that message across to them, then I see that as a personal failure.
Wonderful. So if you don't have any more questions, thank you again, Max, for sharing your thoughts. Amazing presentation. As I said, exceptional experience that you've had over your 50-year career thus far. And obviously, we love what you're doing with Council Approval Group and hope to obviously lead with vision even further. So I'll hand back to the hosts there, Colin and Max, for the last slides.
Yeah, great.
This vision is really, really starting with that visioning, which Colin and Dale led, I think 2 years ago, last year, whatever. Our business is doubled in the last 12 months. And it's because I think we set ourselves apart. We have a vision. We have a focus on people, not customers, they're people. And we're trying to make a bigger difference in their lives. I just see that as rewarding. That comment by John C. Maxwell, let's lead with vision. I think if you could leave you with that, I think that is really, really. Also leave you with the comment that vision without determination, vision without implementation is just a dream. I go back to quoting a fellow that was really, really good for us a few years ago. Said, for good planners, you're fishing in a small pond and you won't get good planners. I look back now and say, we've got the good planners, and every time we get a new planner, we get a better planner. I'm not saying they're better than the others, but I'm just amazed at the quality of people that have come on board with us. And I just want to say thanks to Colin in particular, at 73, to have the opportunity to have learned that the best thing for me in helping people is to continue doing what I'm doing, but to have a people help focus. I quote John Huntsman Sr. as saying, the best thing for the human heart is to bend down and help someone up. And to me, just having that opportunity to continue what I'm doing and I can have this conversation with people. And I've got the confidence that a team of very positive people will make it happen for those people.